This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend, the end.
The book of Revelations has 404 verses. Add the number of people at the Last Supper, minus the number of Filipinos in the Bible, and you get
3,100,000.
3:15 p.m., May 18th. The world will end next week! Spend your children's college fund! Thaw that turkey now! It's the end of the world! God loves you! He's gonna kill you!
Lo and behold, forsooth, I saw a great beast come up from the curb with a delivery charge and blasphemously little cheese and sauce. For he cometh with anchovies and pineapples and the greedy lust for a tip. Okay, did you know that the book of Revelations almost didn't make it into the Bible? And that many, many learned men didn't like it? Hell, Martin Luther didn't like it, but think about it. Who benefits from it being there? It's kind of like Pizza Hut. Now let's look at all the detrimental and deleterious effects that this book has had on society for the last 2,000 years. You know, the good Lord, he said that a good tree doesn't make bad fruit and a bad tree doesn't make good fruit. Now let's just look at the fruit that this book has produced. Fear and anxiety, its depictions of plagues, beasts, and the end of the world, the four horsemen, what have you, can instill deep fear, especially in literalist readers, especially in, weak-minded people. Obsession with end-time predictions. The text's cryptic nature has led to endless speculation about when and how the world will end. This has spawned doomsday cults and movements. Polarization and intolerance. Revelation's stark division between the saved and damned, righteous versus unrighteous, Antichrist, has been used to justify an us versus them mentality within the Christian church. Misinterpretation and manipulation. Its symbolic language 666, Whore of Babylon, is notoriously ambiguous, making it ripe for misuse. Preachers, politicians, and conspiracy theorists have twisted it to push agendas. And that's what it comes down to about the people who benefit from this book. They can keep people blindfolded, swinging their piñata stick around, trying to hit the target, and in doing so can be so easily led astray and manipulated by unscrupulous leaders. And that's the reason why it got put in the book, I have no doubt. The people who put it in there were the people who were working for the Roman emperor and wanted to be able to use it to manipulate people and keep them confused. It's just a huge gaslight. Desensitization to suffering. The book's relentless focus on divine wrath, billions of dying, trumpets, bowls of wrath, and revelation might numb some readers to real-world pain or make suffering seem inevitable. And the inevitable part, that's the real kicker, because people sit back and they allow suffering. They allow evil people to run all over them because they just say, God's going to save us. Massa Jeebus going to come rapture us away. And they sit back on the couch and they don't do anything to oppose the devil in the world. And cultural oversaturation. In modern times, Revelation's imagery has been so heavily recycled in movies, books, and games, Left Behind, what have you, that its original spiritual weight can get lost, turning it into a caricature. You know? It's kind of like calling somebody a Nazi, calling everybody a Nazi for every reason. It desensitizes people to the real Nazis who are out there. So anyway, we're going to go over this and maybe analyze the situation, and maybe I'll shed a little light on little light on the subject for
How
you.
did the book of Revelation make its way into the biblical canon? It had pretty rocky beginnings. Nobody really knew who the author, John of Patmos, was, or if they could trust his authority. It wouldn't be until Justin Martyr in the middle of the 2nd century CE that John of Patmos would be identified with the author of the Gospel of John, but even this identification was on pretty shaky ground because anybody who spoke Greek could see the Greek of Revelation was of a very different kind than the Greek of the Gospel of John. And in the early 4th century CE, Rome legalized Christianity and then became a Christian empire, which kind of cut the legs out from underneath the surface reading of Revelation, which treats the Roman Empire as the beast and the whore and all these other antagonists. So it would seem to be on its way out until one man saved it and put it into the canon for the first time. That would be Athanasius of Alexandria, the Bishop of Alexandria, an influential church leader in Egypt who was struggling for power with a few different factions within the church. And he would actually use the book of Revelation to condemn as the beast and the whore and all these other antagonists, not the Roman Empire, but heretical Christians. And so Athanasius would actually include the book of Revelation in the very first iteration of the canon list that matches the New Testament as we know it today, which took place in 367 in his 39th festal letter. And he would also conclude that letter by condemning anyone who added or took away from this list. So it was really these struggles for structuring power within the Catholic Church that brought the book of Revelation into the canon for the first time.
Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention how this book could get us all killed, literally, like nuclear war. Ever heard of Christian Zionism? The absolute obeisance to all things Israel come directly from some idiot's interpretation of this book. An interpretation that they made up. Just go look at the video I did called Christian Zionism is a PSYOP, and you'll see. Oh, and by the way, that's my dog snoring. I don't have gas or anything. It's the dog. But anyway, let's take a look at it. Who wrote it? They say John the Apostle wrote it, but a lot of people think that it wasn't John the Apostle. There are stylistic differences with the Gospel of John that fueled a lot of doubt about that. In other words, the guy who wrote Revelation didn't write in the same style as the guy who wrote the Gospel of John, who was supposedly the Apostle John. You know, I was an English teacher for decades, and I can tell you, people have their own style of writing just as surely as they have different fingerprints, and it's very difficult to break out of it. So, you know, I'm kind of inclined to believe this. I'm certainly not disinclined. I don't see I really don't see what difference it makes, but I just throw that in there. Now, there's a school of thought vis-a-vis Revelation called preterism that states that every single thing in that book that was predicted already happened, except maybe the second coming. And we're going to go over that. And if you look at what the preterists say and the way they spell out their argument, it really kind of makes sense. Because, you know, think about it. The guy who wrote Revelation said everything in that book was going to happen soon. All right? Did it? If you take the interpretation that it applies to something off in the nebulous future, then no, it didn't. So right there, the guy who wrote the book is either a liar or an ignoramus. And either way, it wouldn't be suited for the Bible. So anyway, let's go over some of this, and I'll show you what they're talking about. And then if it piques your interest, then maybe you can go and start reading or listening to a lot of YouTube videos about preterism, because there's tons of them.
Preterism teaches that most biblical prophecies about the end times were fulfilled in the 1st century, particularly with the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. According to this view, the events described in the book of Revelation, Matthew 24, and Daniel 9 primarily refer to past events, rather than a distant future. Preterism is divided into two main categories, full preterism and partial preterism. Full preterism holds that all prophecies, including the second coming of Christ, were fulfilled by AD 70, while partial preterism teaches that only some were, with Christ's return and final judgment still in the future. Preterism challenges the traditional futuristic interpretation of prophecy, encouraging a historical approach to understanding the Bible. God bless.
Yeah, my old girl over there, Liesel. She snores as loudly as my old granddaddy. But I love her, and I'm not going to wake her up, so there. Let's look at the four horsemen of the apocalypse in Revelation and the subsequent woes. Okay, you have four horsemen. You have the white horse. It's conquest. Rome's expansion under emperors like Vespasian and the earlier Pax Romana under Augustus. Now, Vespasian was the emperor. Well, first he was a general, and then he became the emperor while his son Titus invaded Judea and sacked Jerusalem. Then you have the red horse, the Jewish-Roman War, 66 through 70. It was sparked by the procurator's actions. His name was Florius, and we'll talk about him in a minute. He killed thousands. Then you have the black horse. That's famine, war-induced shortages in Judea from 66 to 70. That was in Josephus's Jewish War. Described starvation in Jerusalem siege. Josephus was a Jew himself who actually fought in the rebellion, and he got captured, but he was a slick talker and a sleazy, slimy kind of guy, and so he managed to slither his way into the Roman camp, and I think he actually became a Roman citizen, which was unheard of, and he wrote a history of the Jewish War called The Jewish War. Then you have the pale horse, death, plagues and violence of the war. Over 1 million Jews died by 70 AD. Quite a few. Then you have martyrs, Nero's persecution of Christians in 64 AD. Tacitus spoke about that, and Domitian's sporadic executions in the 90s. And then you have cosmic upheaval, symbolic of Rome's turmoil. Nero's fall in 68 AD. That was the year of the four emperors, utter chaos in the Roman Empire. You also had Vesuvius's eruption. If you accept the fact that Revelation was written in the 90s AD, then you have Vesuvius's eruption and what have you. So you've got all kinds of shit going on during this time. And you could loosely take all these things and apply them to what actually went on.
Who are the two beasts in Revelation 13? The first beast, from Revelation 13.1 to 10, rises from the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, resembling a leopard, bear, and lion. It symbolizes political power and idolatry, receiving authority from Satan. The second beast, in Revelation 13:11 to 18, rises from the earth with 2 horns like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon. It represents deceptive religious power supporting the first beast, performing false miracles and promoting its worship. It also introduces the mark of the beast, symbolizing allegiance to the first beast. Together,
so now let's talk about some characters in the book, the more famous ones, the ones that everybody's familiar. The beast. Now, it's Nero, guys. Nero Caesar. You've all heard of 666. Some manuscripts say 616. Okay? There's a thing called gematria, which equates letters with numbers. And if you took the gematrial equivalent of 666, in Greek, it spells Nero Caesar. If you take the gematrial equivalent of 616, in Latin, it spells Nero Caesar. So, guys, the beast was Nero. I mean, if you're going to have it two different ways from two different sources, independently of one another, you're kind of forced to conclude that that's what they're talking about. Nero. Nero's persecution of Christians after the 64 AD Rome fire, blaming them for the arson, made him a hated figure among early believers. His cruelty, and he used to he used to like set them on fire, douse them down with pitch and set them on fire as torches to light his banquets while he was eating, and they were burning. It pretty much fits the beast's war against the saints in 13:7. Under Domitian, Rome continued flexing imperial muscle, but Nero's memory loomed as the archetypal tyrant. When he died, he stabbed himself in the throat. Yet for years, the priests the Roman emperors were worshipped as gods. For years, the priests in the Eastern Roman Empire kept saying that he wasn't really dead, and that he was still out there coming around, exerting his influence. They said he'd come back or he had never died. So that could correspond with the story in Revelation where the beast was wounded in the head and came back alive, more or less. Nero, he's crazy and all that, and everybody talks about how bad he was because the winners write the history books, but he was enormously popular in the Roman Empire among the common people. They liked him, folks. So there you have it. The beast is Nero. That's it. I think it's all pretty obvious.
Tell you this, and you may think I'm nuts if you want to, but this is the truth. Either these men are following the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is it is in the Bible. Mm-hmm. They're either following it, just like a plan, and bringing the prophecies in there to pass, to manipulate and control those who believe in those prophecies and neutralize them, so to speak. In other words, if this is written in the Bible and God has ordained it, who am I to resist? It must come to pass. So I'm not going to try to stop it. Okay. What a perfect way to neutralize the opposition right off the bat.
And then you have the false prophet, sometimes called the second beast, and he emerges in Revelations 13, 11 through 17, arising from the earth with two horns like a lamb, but speaking like a dragon. It deceived people into worshiping the first beast, enforcing its mark and image. In the preterist view, this figure represents the religious apparatus supporting Roman rule, specifically the emperor cult in Asia Minor. And these pagan priests, they faked miracles and they did all kinds of shit to hoodwink people. And then also you've got the priestly establishment there in Jerusalem. Most people don't know that, they offered a sacrifice in the temple once a year for the Roman emperor, not to the Roman emperor, but for him, for his well-being and his rule and everything. And in doing so, they admitted that he was their ruler. They acquiesced to it. And then also, remember when they had Jesus standing up in front of all the people with Barabbas, and they chose Barabbas, and then they said, "We have no king but Caesar." I kind of think that's kind of what they're talking about there. But regardless, there's ample evidence to suggest that they were talking about something that happened, concurrently with the fall of the temple and the last days of Jerusalem.
The first time that the Vatican has reported that he is in a reserved prognosis, meaning that it is touch and go.
Right now, something truly unsettling is happening in the Vatican. Rumors are swirling that the Antichrist is finally ready to step out of the shadows and reveal himself to the world. At the same time, the Vatican has officially confirmed that Pope Francis is in a dangerously critical state. The Pope has reportedly acknowledged that his time is coming to an end, and has even requested that preparations for his funeral begin. With his condition worsening, the Vatican is now preparing to choose a new pope, and the atmosphere is filled with tension and anticipation. Some believe this is more than just a medical crisis. It could be the fulfillment of prophecy. According to St. Malachi's prophecy, Pope Francis is the final pope before the rise of the Antichrist. The book of Revelation warns of a false prophet who will deceive the world, and some believe Francis' teachings align with this prophecy. Now, As the Vatican prepares to elect a new leader, could we be entering the tribulation period?
You've got the abomination of desolation. That's in the Revelation too. And that's probably the theft from the temple treasury in the spring of 66 AD. Now, the procurator Florus, he was, the Roman honcho there, and he was corrupt. He was notoriously corrupt. And he just went in and stole a bunch of money from the temple treasury. Now, I've already explained how fabulously wealthy the temple was and the region was, and so he just thought he'd dip his beak and take some. Well, that's what started it off. After they did that, the Jews, they stopped making sacrifice for the emperor, and that's what touched off the whole war, because outraged Jews just did not like that. And rightfully so. Even the Romans thought it was rightful. Titus, Vespasian's son, repeatedly begged them to go ahead and make sacrifice for the emperor again, and they'd let bygones be bygones. They wouldn't sack the city. They'd go their separate ways, and, everything could go back to the way it was before, because Jerusalem was a cash cow for the Roman Empire. Jerusalem paid taxes. That temple, Judea, they paid taxes to Rome. And I've already shown how wealthy Jerusalem was. The Romans didn't want to see Jerusalem sacked. They wanted the money. Titus begged them, and they still refused to do it. And Jesus, he said that the temple would be torn down stone for stone. The temple was covered in gold leaf. That's how wealthy they were. And when they set the fires in and around the temple, the gold leaf melted and ran down in the cracks between the blocks of the temple. So the Roman soldiers, greedy as they were, pulled the temple apart stone by stone to get at the melted gold. And, Jesus said not one stone would be left on another. And by golly, that's exactly right. Oh, and then there's another, I've heard, interpretation about the abomination of desolation. Pompey, when he conquered Judea for the Romans, the Pompey that Caesar defeated, he actually walked into the Holy of Holies and looked around. And then in AD 79, of course, the city, his namesake city, was destroyed by the volcano. Some people saw some symbolism in that too. I don't know, but it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. This thing is so nebulous that you can bring in just about anything and sort of try to fit it around interpretation. People thought that Black Death was, the end times. People are saying today are the end times. People, they've been trying to fit this into anything and everything since the whole thing was written, and it's done nothing but cause a lot of confusion and animosity, acrimony. This is the great whore, the whore of Babylon. And according to the preterists, the whore of Babylon was the Jewish religious establishment. Of the day. However, once again, you go on and on and on. Protestants to this day think that the whore of Babylon is the Catholic Church. And, back during the early days, the nascence of the Protestant Reformation, if you didn't think the Pope was the Antichrist, your life wouldn't be worth much if you were living in a Protestant area. No, they were firmly convinced that the Pope was the Antichrist. But then see, now even today, you've got people talking about the Antichrist being this and the whore being that. It's all just smoke and mirrors to keep people confused. I really think that, and I think that's the reason they put it in that Bible in the first place, just to give them some ammunition to keep people confused. And that's why so many of the early church fathers, and subsequently to that, other great religious leaders have said that it probably shouldn't have been put in there in the first place. Oh, it says here, Revelation, what is it? Oh, okay, I don't know. I don't know the exact verse, but here's what a verse says. And the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Now, there's only one crime in all of the law of Moses that was punishable by being burned up, and that was if the daughter of a priest acted like a harlot. They took her and burned her alive. So that kind of indicates, I think, that the temple was, or that the whore was probably the religious establishment in Jerusalem. There's a picture of the temple there. It was something, man. So anyway, there's two kinds of preterism, partial and full. Full preterism even says that Jesus had come back already when the temple was destroyed. I don't go that far. Partial preterism seems the more logical, the more reasonable interpretation. But then once again, you have people arguing over, inconsequential stuff. You should be living your life well and engaging evil in the world, but instead people are sitting around arguing about this stupid book. I just listed earlier all the bad things that have transpired since the adoption of this into the canon. What good has there been? What good has this book produced? Think about it. Name me one really good thing, any good thing that came out of this book being in the canon. I can't think of one. I'm sure that there will be. I mean, if you think there are, then put it in the comments, but I'm at a loss. Anyhow, that's my 2 cents, and I for what it's worth, because my words aren't going to make any difference. People have been saying this for 2,000 years. They haven't made any difference in the past. Heaven help us.
3, 2, 1. Woohoo! I was right! And there's the earth, so beautiful with your many rings.
Okay, let's see. Earth is channel 23, I think.